Hey, I'm Robbie Kramer. You're listening to the Leverage Podcast, where we discuss using your social skills to hack dating, travel, finding your dream job, and becoming a complete man. Yo, we are back with Steve Weinberg for part 2 of the first episode that we did last show. We brought on Steve, who's my first cousin. So it was a lot of fun to have you on the interview, man. Thanks for coming back for round 2.
Yeah, great to be back. I really enjoyed the first conversation.
And just to give, just for in case guys haven't watched that one or listened to that one, we spoke about some really amazing time-saving strategies. Steve's an expert on planning, saving time. I was implementing a lot of the stuff that you told me about just since last week. In terms of scheduling my week out in advance was great.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, some of the stuff you shared was very powerful. So if you haven't heard that interview, make sure you listen. And this week, we're going to pick up where we left off, and that is about learning languages. 4 languages you speak now: English, German, Hebrew.
Hopefully English. Yeah, Hebrew and German, I'm pretty much fluent, especially German. I teach German at a university, so hopefully I'm pretty good at German. No, I'm excellent at German. Hebrew, I'm also very good, but not as much in an academic way, but definitely like talking on the street with people, texting, all that stuff, watching TV shows. German is my PhD, so I have to be able to like read, 18th century literature and stuff, so.
The thing that always pisses me off is you come to visit me in Kiev like once every few months, or, I see you once every few months. And even though I'm learning Russian like every day and I'm here in the culture, surrounded by people speaking, Russian and Ukrainian, you're somehow always further along than me, which makes me absolutely
wait till you see me next time.
So here I am slaving away, just like a total loser trying to learn a new language. I suck at languages, or that's the story I tell myself anyways. So obviously there's a lot that I'm doing wrong in my approach, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who can relate. You've obviously successfully learned 3 languages and you're working on a 4th. Have you found that each successive language is much easier to learn once you kind of get the hang of what you need to do to learn? I'm sure that's a yes.
Well, yeah. First of all, let me say that like everything that I am going to explain, and also what I explained the last time, is from my own like trial and error. So with languages, I also did everything the wrong way. And also with time saving, I also like used to waste tons of time on, Facebook and stuff like that. So everything I learned is, it's something you get better at with time, how to learn or how to spend your time. So all of the mistakes I see you and other people making with languages is stuff that I used to make. And now I can just sort of jump over all the initial obstacles and hurdles and learn at a much faster rate. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and I was never really interested in learning languages. Obviously, as an English speaker, you can go almost anywhere in the world, and a lot of people will speak English. Living in Eastern Europe and in Kiev, less people speak English than other places that I visited. Living here obviously makes it a challenge if you don't know it. Most of the young people speak English really well, but when dealing with local stuff, like, trying to find someone to do like fluff and fold laundry, or trying to find someone to, make a copy of a key. Like these sort of day-to-day tasks are really difficult when you don't speak the language, because most of the people that are trying to help you out, even grocery shopping, very few people speak English, and it can be obviously a challenge. But most of all, I kind of just felt like an idiot for not knowing any, and I wanted to have respect for the culture for learning the language. And I figured, why not? Obviously, from a dating standpoint, it's nice to be able to have a base of some way to communicate. And it's been fun. I've actually enjoyed learning Russian versus
Yeah.
I remember growing up trying to learn Spanish in middle school and high school. I just hated it. I saw no reason to learn it really. And I think that's maybe the big difference is I had a bad experience as a kid trying to learn a language just because I was forced to learn it. Whereas now it's much more enjoyable because there's a obvious benefit of it.
There's so many things I want to say to that. I don't know where to start, but
I
like,
was going to ask, what do you
yeah,
think is the biggest mistake people make?
first of all, people don't learn the right way, or they think that to learn a language would require like it's too much work. It's not worth, they don't have the time to put in to get to where they need to be. So they might as well not learn at all. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that when you start to see results very quickly, you're more encouraged to keep learning and to go farther. So that's probably why, like, just for Americans, why they don't learn languages in new countries, because they're already doing fine, good enough with English. So why bother learning the native language? And that is a curse, really a curse for Americans and English speakers, because you miss so much of the experience, of the culture. You're really like left in the dark, really. And the amazing thing is that you can just learn like some words and some phrases, and that'll take you so far just with a very small amount. So the biggest mistake people make is that they don't learn the right words. Actually, we're actually pretty boring as a species. We say the same shit like over and over and over again, the same words, the same sentences, and those are the phrases that you need to know. But if you pick up if you take a beginner course, or if you go on in a textbook, or especially in classroom, they teach you all these words that you'll never use.
Like colors and animal names.
Yeah, I mean, this like drives me nuts when I see people learning this way. It's really, it's like they put all this time in, and then they go out, they're all excited to speak the language, and none of the words that they've been learning are the words that people actually use, And it would be so simple, really, if you just learn like 500 words, which really you could do in a month or two, if you really sit with flashcards. A great tip, which actually my brother told me, Jordan, is that you can go through your text messages on your phone, and everything you're writing in English, I think you were there for that. You can just change to, and that's such a great tip,
Make flashcards of those.
Yeah. And like, how really, you so rarely ever have to use the word colors in your life, in your daily life. It's very rare. Same with animals and rooms in the house. That's the trick. Learn the words you're going to need.
So what I've heard from a few different schools of thought are to first learn vocabulary.
Yeah.
Then, well, first learn pronunciation, especially in a language because if you can't hear correctly, then you can't speak correctly, and it'll just all sound mumbled together. Like when I first came to Kiev and I heard people speaking in Ukrainian and Russian, it just sounded like I couldn't pick out the individual words. So I created some flashcards or downloaded a flashcard deck that taught me pronunciation. And now if I hear what people are saying, I can repeat what they're actually saying and pick out the words, and I learn how to pronounce things. So I think that's the first thing that most people say is learn pronunciation first, so you can hear, because if you can't hear, you can't do anything. Then learn vocab, then learn
to me,
grammar.
vocab and pronunciation are the same. Like you have to learn the words as though they would be spoken.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I mean, I did learn a bunch of words while I was learning the pronunciation. They were just specific words to teach different sounds.
My issue with that is it's a little bit too abstract to just get started. You're kind of just starting. I would prefer if you're going to do that, you have to combine it with actual words, something more tangible. Don't just start with sounds.
They were words. Sorry, they are words. They're just specific words that have different sounds to be able to recognize.
Yeah, like anyways, a lot of
not to dwell on that. Yeah,
a lot of classes also start by learning the alphabet, and that is another huge mistake, because to learn the alphabet, A to Z, it actually takes some time. And really, you don't need individual letters very much. And often they don't even reflect the actual sounds being used. So I say better just dive right into the language and just start speaking, like get out there, just start using it, breaking your teeth, as they say in Hebrew.
What about
use it? Use the language. You can't
what
just
about
learn
the
in a
apps?
book.
The
Again, this is
mainstream
like,
apps,
I'm
Duolingo,
excited to talk
Rosetta
to you about
Stone.
this. I'm excited to talk to you about this
Uh,
because so much of this relates to our last conversation.
mhm.
Because I believe that to learn a language, just like to be successful, you have to get away from your devices or get off your phone. And then also, we can talk about this later maybe, but like it's something you have to work on diligently every day, learning a language. It's a compound effect. Small amount of time every day, and you see vast changes over time. Regarding the apps, this is a question I ask myself, how many like great memories do you have? Something that happened while you were on your phone that you can remember? Pretty much that time you spend on your phone in terms of your memory, you never really have dreams about being on your phone. You don't really look back at a time you're on your phone. So there's something that when you're on the phone, it's like the information is not being stored in your mind as well as if you're out in the world experiencing things, right? So there's something about the phone that like doesn't trigger the mind to retain the material. Phones also have there's just a lot of distractions when you're on the phone because you might get a message. The screen is small. I much prefer using for flashcards, like making your own flashcards, going through them on paper. Yeah. Our minds, like we remember experiences and the phone is not an experience. Having said that, I think that if you're using it like for audio content, like listening to something while you're walking, listening to a basic conversation, using YouTube to watch like videos, those kinds of things are very helpful. But the actual apps, like I'm very much against Duolingo, and I've never tried Rosetta Stone, but I think it's the same premise, right?
I think it sucks more than Duolingo.
Oh, really? Yeah. And I hear so many people, and like, I really hope this doesn't sound like snobby or whatever, but people say, I'm learning a language, I'm using Duolingo. And I'm just like, you're never going to learn that way, Like these apps are fool's gold because they create this promise of like, yeah, if you do this app, you get these prizes and things like that. But
yeah, I mean, I think you can pick up a little bit, but I totally agree with you that you're going to retain way more information by not being on your phone and having real conversations. Or I've learned way more just going into a restaurant and fumbling around with phrases and talking to, people in everyday life. That's where it really matters. And also when you make a mistake and people correct you, you're going to remember that more because you're going to feel embarrassed.
Like I have so many memories from when I remembered learning certain words in various languages, and like the experience just stuck with me because it was like a shopkeeper was yelling at me or, something like that.
Yeah. So going back, just so we're giving really tangible advice here, because there's so much awesome stuff you have to give. So people are starting, they need to learn words. Which words do they pick? They go through their phone, they learn those, they can make flashcards of the stuff they typically say. Mm-hmm. Are there other word lists, or how do you know which ones to pick or which ones not to, which are a waste?
I mean, I think the text message is a good rule of thumb. I mean, it's like, I'm teaching my parents Hebrew at the moment. Sometimes, I'll be home and we'll be in the kitchen and they'll say things to me in English and I'll say, say that in Hebrew. Because again, it's the same sentences over and over again. Where are you going? What time are you leaving? Do you want coffee? How was your day? How did you sleep? So if you just become more mindful of the words that you're using, these boring phrases that we're just constantly saying, write those down, make note of it. if you can find somebody that you can text in another culture, like making plans with somebody. So I have a friend who's actually from Kiev, and actually you met him, this guy, Tim, great guy.
Okay.
And he's actually in New York. So we're making plans to hang out on Sunday. I don't know much Russian yet. He speaks Russian, of course. So I'm writing him in Russian, like, do you want to meet on Sunday? Do you want to meet at this time? And I'm going on Google Translate and like looking up the phrases. And if I really wanted to learn, I would write everything down on cards. And then I would spend, when I'm having my coffee every morning, I would go through them. Russian, I can't devote too much time to because I have to worry about German and Hebrew and also French. But
so someone who's really busy and they don't have a lot of
yeah.
time and they want to learn
Yeah.
a language, how would you recommend they best utilize their time and study in a way that's not painfully boring? Because one thing that's fun about the apps is they do have those little rewards, and you get, past check marks.
I would
you get little
recommend an
coins
app.
and
Yeah, but like I said, that's fool's gold. So it's very simple. I'll just tell you what I've been doing with Russian, because I've had to really put Russian as like a low priority, but I still want to learn. Every morning I have routine. That's another thing we didn't talk about last time, is routine, like doing the same thing at the same time every day. And then when you don't do it, you feel like something's missing. So first, I have this course called earpods, Russian earpods, or earworms. They have it for all languages. And when I get up in the morning, I put it on, and it's like, it's just an English speaker talking to a native speaker in that language, and they are repeating each other with music in the background. So it's a nice way to start the morning. And if you do that, the first time you listen to it, you won't really remember the words. But if you just keep doing it every morning, after a few months, it'll start to stick.
yeah, you remember the stupid little jingles and.
Yeah, that's what it's geared for. And the best
Right.
thing is it doesn't take up any of your time, because you have to get ready in the morning anyway. Like, instead of brushing your teeth and just like staring at yourself in the mirror or in the shower, you're just learning a language, and it literally takes up none of your time.
Are you consciously focusing on it? Because I find when I do that, I tune out a lot of the time and just completely miss everything.
The best thing you should do for that, I agree with that, is you should try to quiz yourself as it's going on. Like if the native speaker says, or if the English speaker says, good morning, and then try to mimic what the native speaker would say. Like, kind of
To
give
stay
yourself
engaged,
a quiz.
obviously. Yeah.
And what also I did was I made flashcards with all the phrases from the course, and I learned those on my own. And that I like to look at flashcards also just when I'm walking somewhere. Like if I have a 30-minute walk, you can easily walk and do flashcards. And again, you're not losing any time because you have to walk anyway.
And then the act of writing the flashcards out makes a big difference too.
It helps. It helps.
Yeah.
But really the only way you can learn words is you have to sit. You have to not necessarily sit. You can walk, but you have to make mistakes and then correct yourself. Like, how do you say this? How do you say check in Russian is shot? Yeah?
Shot, yeah.
Shot. So like the first time someone says to you, check means shot, you'll just forget it immediately. But if you go through your flashcards, after 3 or 4 times of getting it wrong, you'll remember. And if you really have trouble with it, you give yourself a mnemonic device. Like, shot, after my shot of whiskey, I need a shot, to check.
Yeah.
And then you'll remember. The next great way to start, if you don't have a lot of time, is this innovative language app, which I also recommended to you.
I've been using that. Yep.
And they have these absolute beginner lessons. It's really, it's again a conversation, and the format of it is great.
That app is called Russian Pod 101. And it's by Innovative, but do they have that for other languages too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And make sure you do the absolute beginner lessons. And what I found, I do that when I'm driving to work. I put those on. And I found that, again, like, you have to always learn as much as you can, learn actively. So you're more likely to remember when you're engaging with it, you're making mistakes, not when you're just sitting back and listening. It's true with any kind of learning, you know?
Sure. You will retain much more information if you learn with multiple senses and not just listening to it.
So like when I go through the lessons now, at the end of the lesson, if I have a few minutes, I'll quiz myself on what was in the lesson. Like maybe the one character said, I want to go to the park. It's relaxing there. And they talked about in the lesson how to say that, but if I don't try myself to say it on my own, like taking the training wheels off, then it'll take me much longer to remember it.
When would you recommend getting a teacher or a tutor? Because funny story, when I first came and wanted to learn the language, before really doing anything, even before apps, I said, oh, I'll just get a Russian teacher because it's cheap to get a Russian teacher here. You can get one for 10, 15 bucks an hour, much cheaper than in the US.
Yeah.
So I hired this lady who was a recommendation from a friend, and I think I did 4-hour-long sessions, and it was just the most painful, embarrassing, pathetic showing on my part. I could tell she was just so miserable teaching this total retard.
That's not good. But she's no. First of all, I believe that there's no. Well, I feel uncomfortable just hearing that story because I just can't even. I'm picturing you with this like old like Russian like what like Dabushka, can you say, or babushka?
Babushka, yeah.
And I'm just like,
it was so funny.
That's just made for like a sitcom or something.
It was ridiculous.
But actually, first of all, I think that to some extent, I believe that there's no bad students, only bad teachers. Mm-hmm. The duty is on her to make it interesting and fun for you. And there's so many bad language teachers, man. Like in schools, you know, universities, it's a travesty. It's just people don't know how to teach the language and how to make it interesting and fun. Yeah.
All right, I can blame it on her then.
But I think that like getting a teacher, if you get a good teacher, you know.
Yeah.
But you could also just find like a language partner.
I feel like, I mean, before you said what you just said, the view I had of that situation was it would have probably been better if I had a bit more of a base before hiring a tutor, but maybe that's wrong. When did you start working with other people?
We also, in general, we have this idea that like we need a teacher whenever we want to learn something. It's like if we have a health problem, it's like, well, I'll listen to what my doctor says, and we kind of put the responsibility on someone else to do what. So there's no replacement for like sitting, like kind of doing your homework, right? Like kind of.
Yeah, and I admit I wasn't doing my homework because I hated it, and of course she would show up and be like, "Do you remember conjugations?" No. So we'd just be doing the same thing over and over, which sucked. But you know, when I picked up the book, she told me to read and started going through it and learned how to read. That certainly helped. I think
so. I teach now my students. I think what I'm able to give them that I couldn't give myself when I started. First of all, I can immediately like give them these how to learn a language tips. I can teach them learning how to learn a language is probably more important than actually learning the language, if that makes sense. So like a teacher should be able to advise you like I'm doing now, where to focus your energy. How does your mind work? How does the mind work in terms of learning a language? That's very valuable for a teacher to do. Accent correction is extremely valuable. That's something that you really need a teacher for. I'm constantly correcting my students, even though, you know, they're wonderful students, but yeah, that's something that is very hard to learn on your own, I think. Teachers will also, it's kind of like having a personal trainer. Like it gives you motivation to stay on task. They push you more than you would push yourself, you know, preferably. So if you have a teacher like that, then you should, if you have the time for it, you should do that from right away. Like I wish I had time for a Russian teacher, but I just, I have to prioritize. But, and like, again, if you have a teacher, hopefully you're speaking with them in the native language. If they're speaking to you in English, then they're not a good teacher. If they're teaching you Russian largely with English, or whatever language you're learning. And that is great practice too, because you get to practice speaking. So you need to learn a language, you need to work all the different muscle groups of your mind: speaking, writing, reading, listening. Like, the reason that it's not like we were born able to speak English so well. It's because we've had experienced English in every shape and size in our lives. We went to summer camp, we went out to like thousands of dinners with ordering, and we've heard every accent, so I say that native speakers, you're like, it's like how Beethoven is playing piano. It's like he can just go up and down the piano.
Reps. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like
master native. Yeah. So, but it's like learning an instrument. So yeah, you just gotta.
Now, a lot of people think
yeah,
there's this myth that children can learn languages better than adults. What do you say to that?
So children, their minds are more flexible. It's just like how we evolve when we're younger. Our minds are wired to take in new information very quickly and like absorb it. And the older you get, the more hardened your brain becomes, because it's kind of like, now if we hear a foreign language, our mind tells us, don't pay attention to that. It's just gibberish, There's nothing valuable in that. So, so children have that advantage. As adults, we have an advantage. We're better at strategizing how to learn a language. So we can really use our time and resources wisely in a way that children cannot. It's a myth also that, a lot of parents will want so I guess what I want to say also is it's exaggerated, the difference between kids and adults. We're much more similar than people say. So children also need to learn the language actively, just like we do. So if you take a child that's 8 years old and you want them to learn French, and you give them like a French nanny, and it talks to the French nanny for, half an hour, a few times a week, and the nanny keeps going back to English and stuff like that, it's not gonna stick. If you put the kid in France for a year, he'll be native French speaker, because he's doing it every day. He has to use it. He has to use it like to get what he wants, right? English is not an option.
It's forced into it. How long would you say how long did it take you to learn Hebrew and German, or at least to a point where you were fluent? It's really hard to define fluency, of course, because obviously there's different levels, but maybe, like a 7 or an 8-year-old, or even a 6-year-old, right? Like, how old are you when you can have really normal basic conversations and understand 90% of what everyone's saying? What are you, like 6, 5?
No, I think you're younger. I think you're 4 probably.
4?
Yeah.
So to get to like a 4-year-old level, you can do that.
I honestly think it
6
corresponds.
months, a year.
I would say, if you're living there and like you're only speaking the native language and you're studying every day, I would say between a year and 2 years, 1 to 2 years.
So there's hope. I have 6 months left.
But honestly, like, are you doing what you need to do? Because it's so easy to break into English. Like, if you look something up, if I want to look up something online, I try to do it in the native language now.
Do you? Yeah, I could be much more serious about it.
I'm constantly asking myself, can I be doing this if I'm texting somebody, Like if I'm looking up a recipe, I'll watch a YouTube recipe in the native language. You have to, okay, so another thing is you have to like get over the certain hurdle where there's a certain point where you're just going to suck and you can't look up stuff online because you just don't know enough. So you have to have this like suck period for like, 3 to 6 months. And then once you get, it's again, the compound effect, right? You're putting a penny down every day, you're poor. And then one day you have like $1 million, but you have to be poor for a while.
Yeah.
But once you get to that point where you have some money to spend, metaphorically speaking, you need to do everything you can to use the language. Like I do yoga in Hebrew, yoga videos in Hebrew. I do meditations in German. Like maybe if you're going to meditate, I'll guide a meditation. Try to do it in Russian. Once you get to that level. And if anyone speaks to you in English, you say, "Я рад говорить по-русски." Something like that. Are you gonna edit that out? Oh man.
Говорите по-русски.
You say, "Speak to me in Russian," or "I'm happy to speak with you in Russian." It comes down to you, how fast you want to learn the language.
That makes sense.
So
yeah.
Asking how much time is a misleading question because it's kind of like asking, how long. It's like asking a couple, like, how long have you guys been dating? Well, you could be dating someone for 3 months, but if you're seeing them every day, that could be a very, deep relationship. But if you can be dating someone for 3 years and you only see them once a month, so It's not really the right question.
Good point.
Yeah.
So what else do we have to know about learning languages? What did you not tell us that's important?
I feel like I got out most of it. I think because we're native English speakers, it makes it so tempting to just always do things in English. Like, let's say you and I would be happy to have a whole conversation with you in Russian for 15 minutes to practice.
Yeah.
But I feel like it'd be hard for us to do that because we would be tempted to just go to English.
Yeah, so it's more convenient. Because obviously we couldn't communicate very well. So, and we don't speak that often anyways. So, we wouldn't want to waste the time fumbling around. However, when we were together in, for the family reunion recently, we did that car ride where we just listened to Russian stuff and practice, which is great.
Do things that you enjoy. If you can find a way to make the language learning something that you also enjoy, that's also great. So if there's like a song you want to learn, like learn the words, what the words mean. If maybe there's a book you want to read, a poem.
You recommended listening to songs with captions on YouTube.
Yes,
that was good practice. I've gone as far as written down lyrics to songs that are catchy that I want to sing along to, which is a lot of fun.
Awesome, man.
And that's a real hit with the ladies. When like a really popular song comes on, you can sing the chorus, and you don't speak any Russian, but you like nail the chorus. They're always like, "Whoa, how do you know that?" Yeah, it's like, well, I just wrote it down and practiced it. So,
yeah. It makes you really connect with people if you know their language. Especially, I think people expect Americans to just only speak English. So I would say that, music is always great. Music is a great way to it's a great memory tool. But again, you have to actually work. You have to learn the words. You can't just put it on in the background or then you just won't learn anything. Yeah, so YouTube is your best friend for language learning. And what you need to do is again, integrate it as much as you can into your day. You have to learn on the go because most people don't have time to just sit and at their desk and study.
Yeah.
So get AirPods or headphones. Get a YouTube subscription so you can listen without ads. And then just repetition. Like just listen to the same conversations over and over. Slow it down. And on YouTube, you can slow it down 75%. Oh, another big thing. Do not worry about grammar. Like, it doesn't matter if you say, okay, let's say English example. He go to the store. He go. Okay, obviously that's incorrect. But we know
what you mean.
We know what you mean. So when you're first starting, just learn, you need to just learn what you need to learn to interact in the world. And then you'll learn all the grammar, and that stuff will come later, and you can correct yourself over time. But if you try to learn too much grammar early on, then you'll just get frustrated and you won't be able to use it. You're not using your resources wisely.
Well, that was one of the things that actually frustrated me about the Absolute Beginner series in that Russian pod, because I've been going through that, and they're really heavy on the grammar once you get past.
Oh yeah, see, I ignore the grammar. I ignore the grammar sections.
Oh, thanks for telling me.
They're kind of useful.
Been wasting.
No, the best part about those apps, just go through the conversations are great because they're conversations people actually have and words they actually use. And then there's a tool where you can do the dialogue track. And
just the line by line, yeah. Okay.
Repeat it and just keep listening.
Because I try to remember the grammar rules, and it's like, oh, no chance.
No, you don't
really
need the grammar.
Me off.
You don't need the grammar. Yeah, sorry about that. I should have told you. It's such an art. Learning a language is such an art. It's like you have to be so fine-tuned to doing it the right way, or you get sidetracked. You know.
And frustrated and want to quit. That's
I feel like
I get so frustrated.
Yeah, you have to be patient. You know, definitely be patient. Mm-hmm. We live in a world now with the internet, so like you can live your whole life as if you're in another country. Just go on the Russian Wikipedia, you know, or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're not limited to. I'm trying to give advice to your listeners who might not live in Russia. Yeah.
Do you think when AI comes out and, you know, they have the ability to basically, I mean, now you can speak into your phone and it'll translate pretty close to perfectly and spit out Russian or spit out Spanish or whatever you're trying to speak in.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of intelligence will have on language learning, or just the need to? Some people think that there will be like no point to learn languages in the future because you'll just have like translators you could just totally hack the whole system with. I know that's a tough question, but because the reason I ask is I've actually had this thought like, oh, why bother? In 5 years, they'll probably have it solved.
I mean, look, to a certain extent.
And just to lead that, I obviously know that the main answer is because it's if you actually learn it, there's that huge satisfaction that comes from learning it, accomplishing something hard, and
but you
realizing that you could do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I have a special one for language just because I feel like a failure at it forever. And I think a lot of Americans have this, and they judge themselves comparing to people from Europe or something. But people from Europe, they kind of have to learn other languages because, you know, you're in a smaller country. There's 4 different languages spoken maybe in the country surrounding you, and they put a huge value on learning languages at a young age. Whereas in the U.S., you've got Canada, they speak English, you know, a huge ocean on each side, and below is Mexico, and you're not doing tons of business with Mexico. So obviously I learned Spanish growing up, but it just wasn't a priority. And I think in Europe especially, it's a priority for most people growing up. So almost everyone's bilingual, trilingual, but most Americans are not, obviously.
Yeah, it's a huge problem with our education system and our just ideology, like superpower ideology. I think that a lot of people I feel really bad for people that say like, I'm not good at learning languages, you know, and they go from that statement to like, I'm not going to learn. And it's not true. Like, it's just anyone can learn a language. It's just like learning it the right way.
You learned English.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one of your friends in Kiev was like, I don't want to spend the time to learn Russian. You know, I don't want to spend time learning words. And I was like, well, you just learned my name. You know, that's a new word.
Which dipshit said that?
Can I say on the air? I don't know.
Maybe we'll edit it out. Depending
Israeli
on who it
guy.
is.
The
There's a
one
few.
who had came here for Passover.
The tall one. Yeah.
Great
Okay.
guy. I love him.
Yeah.
But people, like, it's the same thing.
I have
You
a
learn
few
new
Israeli ones.
language.
I'm trying to remember who. Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
If
people,
he
it's like,
listens to this sometimes, so I'm not going to edit that out. He knows who he is.
but like, you know, it's actually the same as like someone tells you their name at a party and you forget it. That's like how you learn languages. Like, you forget it first. You see them enough times, and it's like you'll never forget their name.
I make the point whenever I learn someone's name, I try to write it in fire on their forehead. Like, I spell it out. Usually allows me to remember it every time. Yeah. I brand you with Steve.
What I do is I like to talk about what their name means. And it's funny because it's actually very applicable to learning languages. If someone says like, "Oh, my name's Diana," I'll be like, "Oh, like you probably like Princess Diana or something like that," or like the
Hopefully, you're not saying that.
Or
you could say, well, hopefully from a dating perspective, you wouldn't be saying it, but you could say, "Oh, how often do assholes say, oh, like Princess Diana?" Then you could do it.
Okay, new example. It's basically I try to, or if their name's Sarah, I'll say like, "Oh, like, you know, it's a biblical character, Sarah." Whatever I need to do to remember their name. Yeah, okay. Princess Diana, I don't really do. I don't meet anyone named Diana anyway. Who's named Diana?
I know one Diana, and I call her, or it's Diana, and I call her, well, Princess Diana. And that kind of stuck, and everyone calls her Princess Diana.
That's cute. So, like, basically, the point is that will allow you to remember their name if you have a conversation about their name. But it's the same thing with learning a language. If you actually, like, engage with the word, you'll remember it. But if someone just says, "Oh, this means this," you'll forget it immediately. And then if you see Diana every day, you're not going to forget her name, you know? That's a great analogy, I think. So anyone who says, "I'm bad at learning languages," it's like they're basically saying, my brain like doesn't work, you know?
My brain's stupid.
Yeah. So no excuses.
Did you find how would you compare Israel to Germany to Russia in terms of dating and knowing language versus not knowing language? Because you've experienced all of those with and without to some degree.
I think in Russia, in Germany, it's almost like unnecessary because they speak English so well there. And they're just like, yeah, if anything, I mean, I don't think it really scored me many points, but I knew German.
It scores me a lot of points when I know Russian here.
Oh, totally. Well, first, that's just German girls in general, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, I tell them I'm doing my PhD in German literature. They, like, don't give a shit, you know? Like, it's just like...
Cool story, bro. I mean, I'm trying to think. If a German girl I was on a date with in the U.S. told me she was doing her PhD in English, I probably wouldn't give a shit either.
Yeah. But for her, it's like a big deal.
Right.
But I think if you told a Russian girl you're doing it in Russian literature, they would be pretty impressed.
Yeah.
Russian girl, I think it's just like reflects the attitude. Like they're just more welcoming, more enthusiastic about new people. I don't know, in Russia. Mm-hmm. I conclude Ukraine and Russia. I just think they're a little more starstruck if you know Russian.
Because less people try to learn it.
Well, they're just more starstruck by foreign Westerners in general, and less people try to learn it. And in
you do
Israel,
get massive credit for putting in the effort. It's almost like a slap in the face a bit if you go to someone's country and you don't bother to learn it at all. It's kind of a big fuck you, in a sense. Whereas when you do put in the effort and you're showing that you're interested in the culture and learning the language, it's a sign of respect, I think. So to go to a country and not learn it at all and just be like a big swinging American dick or whatever, I know English, I don't need to learn this language, everyone speaks English. I think.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. It's a very
didn't work out too badly for you.
No, but I've been learning
American
Russian.
Dick. Yeah, for like the last 6 months.
Since the beginning I've been learning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you were
Didn't work
mainly
out
just
for that. Didn't work out for that other guy we were mentioning. That's who I thought you were laughing at anyways. I didn't know the joke was on me.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, wasn't that what you were for like initially in Kiev? Just like English, like American dude, just.
Well, yeah, because I didn't know anything. So obviously that, you know, that was part of it. But
I'm saying now you're learning, but at first.
I was learning at first too. I just wasn't quite as diligent about it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, my buddy told me specifically, like, don't waste your time learning this. And I was like, I still kind of want to. I feel like after watching this, if I knew nothing about languages, I'd be in a much better position. I've definitely learned quite a bit, even though I've talked to you about this stuff before, but it's been good to rehash it and remember, make flashcards of the shit that you write out in text. You'll use that the most. Engage all your senses when it comes to learning. Find a way to integrate it with your everyday life.
Yes.
Don't be a schmuck. You got to practice all the time. You got to take the time to, if you're going to text someone that speaks the language you're trying to learn, you might as well text them in that language. Use Google Translate. Listen to music and other sort of learning materials. Some apps are useful, some suck. Something's better than nothing, obviously. Like there's some stuff I've learned from Duolingo that stuck. But for the most part, I think you're right that it's you get suckered into thinking you're learning more than you really are, and that time.
I think if you use it as a supplement, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe I should start doing that, but I don't like to be on my phone, like just.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
And going back to that, I agree. Spending more time on your phone is not what I'm looking to do, anyways, at this point. And your last episode had a lot of awesome stuff on getting off your phone and kind of into your life. So if you guys haven't listened to that, make sure you listen to Steve's other interview. And awesome. Thanks so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
Cool, buddy.
Thanks for listening. If you want more, go to innerconfidence.com and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for the latest episodes.